Hi, my name is Ann Jensen, and I'll be walking you through this portion of the application workshop. So all applications, artistic documentation, and support materials are submitted online through our grant portal, which you can see here on the screen. If you're a returning grantee, you'll simply log in using the same credentials and update your account information as needed before beginning the application. If you're not a returning applicant, you'll need to create a new account. So you'll click on the words register on the upper right side of the web page, and you'll start a new user account. So when asked what type of applicant are you, you'll select organization rather than individual. So start a new user account as an organization, not an individual. And finally, remember to check your email and verify your account in order to complete your registration. The next step you'll need to complete is to fill out your eligibility profile. The profile will ask you to provide a series of information, which you can see displayed there. And note that grant applications are not visible until the eligibility profile is completed. So since you need to respond to those questions, you'll need to finish this step before you can even see the grants that you're eligible for, because it will base those based on your answers here in the profile. Okay, some tips for success. So after completing these steps, you'll be able to view the grant applications that are open. Make sure to save your passwords. So anyone else now or in the future who needs to access the grant information will need to know your login information and password. So be sure to save that. We recommend copying and pasting all narrative answers from a Word document. There's strict character counts, and so it's often easier to draft your answers outside of the application itself, and then copy and paste them. And a particular reminder, we recommend you begin with the data arts portion of the application, as the most important questions in the application won't be answerable without your data arts OGP funder report. Okay, so next, beginning an online application. So any grants you may be eligible for will appear after you complete the eligibility profile and user setup. And so to start the application, just search under programs and then click the green start button under the appropriate application. And you will also have the option to return to the grant application. So know that the filling out the application will take some time. So you may want to save it and come back to it later when you have more time. When you return and resume the application, you'll just sign back into SurveyMonkey Apply. You'll find the application and click Continue, and you will then be able to see the OGP grant that you've already started. This is just a little overview of the application tasks. Note that your application will be available in full with each section separated out in the task list. And this makes it easier for you to access or continue work on specific pieces of the application quickly. You can just simply click on the task that you're working on in that list of tasks. Some important things to note. Remember that you need to fill out the eligibility questionnaire before completing the rest of the application, since some of that information is will automatically be fed into other parts of the application. And also make sure you save often and ensure that the task is complete when you go back to the dashboard before moving on. And once you've completed and submitted your application, make sure that you download and save a copy. And one final note here is that some tasks will not be editable until other tasks have been completed. So if you look here in the list, project narrative and expense summary and OGP projected revenue both have a note that they cannot be started at this time. That's because you need to have completed the task number 2 OGP budget and project in order for those to be open for editing, simply because they will automatically populate with some of the data that you enter in budget and project. Okay, some tips for answering narrative questions. So again, we recommend copying and pasting from Word. And note that the character limits are character limits, not word limits. More is not necessarily better. We encourage you to be succinct. We recommend providing facts and information about the organization that allow panelists to understand the vision and long-term planning. Highlight your organization and goals. Some questions you might consider are how is your programming unique? Who do you want to serve? What do you uniquely provide to LA County residents? How have you addressed challenges? How is your staff and leadership trained and qualified to lead the project? We recommend that you be transparent. What will help you achieve the goals of your project? And so note that it's not the time for hyperbole or repetition. We recommend not being overly verbose. Just answer each of the questions and move on. We recommend using bullet points and outlines where possible. They are help our panelists easily read through all of your information and highlight your key application points. Keep in mind that panelists are not they're asked to base their scores on the information provided in the application, not on what they assume about your organization. So we recommend providing more than just your season calendar. Provide that you should provide goals and needs to be addressed with the funding in the narrative. Why should the panelists care? Connect the dots just be sure to connect the dots for them and tie everything back to your long-term mission. Remember that consistency and clarity is key. And one final point, we recommend that you have someone proofread the application before submitting it. So the organizational narrative section of the application is where you'll describe your mission, history, and programming. You'll provide information about leadership, the values of the organization, and the way you make artistic decisions. This is where you'll tell your organization's story. So provide details about the evolution of your organization here. You want to make sure to answer each of the prompt questions. And please note that some of the character counts have been updated and some questions have been reworked or updated this year. So if you've applied in previous years, you'll just want to review those changes. The CEII questions are located under the Planning and Leadership section. Applicants should address how they are integrating the values of cultural equity and inclusion in the organization's work, both internally and externally. And these questions are linked to the review criteria, which we'll discuss later. Refer to the application sample online to see the questions. So note that this task has updated character counts and a new checklist. So you'll use this task here to describe your community and audience. You'll also be asked to describe the activities and strategies that you've implemented or are planning to implement in the future around the values of cultural equity and inclusion in the arts. See the application instructions to review what the new questions are. So everyone answers this question differently based on their organization, so provide as much detail as you can. Paint the picture and be more specific than just providing the demographics of the county. You're not serving the whole county of Los Angeles, so highlight the specific groups that you are serving. Use census data, survey data, give as much quantitative info as you can to capture who your audience and participants are. Be creative in your explanation. Tell reviewers who your audience is and why they attend. or why they participate in your events, and help panelists understand how you reach out to audiences and provide programs and services. If you've made changes that speak to your cultural equity vision, highlight those in your response to the new question. The panel will also want to understand how you determine what will be and is important to this community. So be sure to address that. Articulate your commitment to cultural equity and how you are addressing this in your engagement with your community and audience. Any new outreach programs, free admission, scholarship programs? Have you introduced new ways to reach new audiences that you haven't reached before? And for the checklist question, you're checking the boxes for any specific communities and groups that your programming reaches or will reach with this funding. Okay, some application tips for completing the project revenue and expense summary. So note that the project expense budget has been reworked to be a checklist, and it's been combined with the project narrative in order to streamline the application. You'll want to summarize anticipated project revenue and expenses for the proposed project during the grant period. Show only the income and expenses that are specific to your proposal. Provide context at the bottom of each summary in the explanation field if needed. And don't be scared of the numbers. Just help the panelists understand your story by putting the puzzle pieces together for them. The numbers will help provide the full picture of what you will do with this funding, so make sure that they match and what you're saying in the narrative is clear so that the panelists can understand your story. Here's a sample of the projected revenue table. So in this task, applicants simply need to provide the total matching amount and a summary of the sources in the explanations. You may use the worksheet linked in the instructions to think through how your organization will provide this match. Not required, but that's available as a resource. Some tips here. Enter the projected resources of revenue, enter the projected sources of revenue for the proposed project during the grant period. You'll include both earned and contributed sources of revenue. Show only the income specific to the proposal. And note that you do not need new sources of income. And you do not enter the organization's total annual revenue. The match is specific to the project. Remember that these are 2-year grants with a 1-to-1 match required for each year. And again, these don't need to be new sources of income. Make sure that the sum total for the matching income for year 1 and year 2 are equivalent or more than the OGP request amount. So for example, if your OGP request is $2,700 and each year you'll receive $1,400, you'll match the proposed $1,400 each year, meaning that the columns must total to $1,400 or more. All right, your projected expense summary. So this projected expense table has been revamped to streamline the application. In prior years, the applicant was required to list out amounts or percentages next to the items. This year, the applicant simply needs to check all of the projected expenses for the whole project, keeping in mind that your total project cost is going to double or more than the grant request because of the dollar-for-dollar match requirement. So use the project budget expense explanations section at the bottom of the page to provide details about the type, frequency, and breakdown of expenses as needed. It's recommended the compensation, fees, commissions, and honoraria paid to artists and/or arts educators is explained in further detail. Provide context for your project budget. Make sure the panelists know what you need to pay for and how. So make sure that you show that you have matching expenses of greater or equal or greater value. And once again, make sure to always save on each page so that you don't lose your work. And just going over the review criteria. So we recommend that you download and read through the review criteria guidelines, which are in the main OGP guidelines document on page 19. And reviewing this criteria will provide insight on what the panelists will focus on and look for in your application. Each piece of the application should help the panelists understand why this project will make a difference for your organization, and that should all make sense for them. Artistic samples will bring the narrative to life. They can boost an application with an average narrative. So be sure to emphasize or focus particularly on your artistic samples. They really help paint a picture for the panelists. Be sure to connect the dots for the panelists. Make sure they aren't left wondering or unclear about something. And note that the panelists are your peers, so they'll have a sense of what high quality work looks and feels and sounds like within the discipline that you're applying under. They'll know what it takes to achieve that level of work, both administratively and artistically. All right, some pro tips for applying. So read the guidelines. That is absolutely necessary. Make sure you read through those, especially applicants that are reapplying to this program this year, as there are many changes. So just note those changes and be prepared for them. Keep your notes and passwords accessible, and download your submitted application. Okay, so just take a moment to review the application timeline. So the deadline is September 30th by 11:59 p.m. PST. The panel meetings where we review your application will take place in February and March. We have roughly 80 panelists involved, and applicants will be notified and awards announced in July. So we're more than happy to help you with your applications. Please call us with any questions. Note that there's, again, only the one deadline for all of our programs this year, which is Tuesday, September 30th. And make sure to submit your application by 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You must set your account settings on SurveyMonkey Apply to ensure that they're correct. So double check your account settings there just to make sure you're not out of sync. And finally, no extensions. So remember, it can take several days to apply, so be sure to get in there early. You don't want to be there right at the end when we have a lot of people and the server can get busy. Applications are reviewed and scored by a grant peer review panel made up of artists, arts professionals, community members, and others with knowledge and professional qualifications in the arts and with familiarity of the Los Angeles region's arts sector. So whether you do or do not receive the funding, which at this point about 90% of applicants will receive funding, you will be able to get a summary of your panel comments from us via a panel feedback call that we will provide. The call will include notes and constructive feedback. And we encourage everyone to receive the feedback and to set up time to discuss your panel feedback with us. And we're always seeking new panelists. So if you're interested, send us an email. Note that you wouldn't be able to be a panelist during a cycle that you're applying for funding in. So if you're applying this year, you wouldn't be able to serve as a panelist, but please keep in mind that we're always looking for panelists. And if you decide not to apply, serving as a panelist can be a really great way to get a sense of how the application process works and what panelists look for in the panel process. Okay, so just a few final notes there for you to note. That's it for our presentation. And thank you for taking the time to view this application workshop. and we wish you all the best.